Okay, we're back with the Second Punic War. All right, so the Second Punic War, we have the introduction of a man named Hannibal. Now, like we said before, in the First Punic War, his father, Hamilcar, basically instilled in Hannibal to always hate Rome and to do whatever it takes to defeat Rome. So this has been ingrained in his head since he was, a child. So when Hannibal finally gets the chance to take over, and go attack Rome. This is like his dream. He thinks it's his destiny. Um, and for him, he's already, he's going to show that he's the greatest general of all time because he's going to take kind of this, I'm going to say it, some ragtag troops, and he's going to basically torture Rome for over a decade at their own doorstep. All right. So he raises a force of over 50,000 men, 9,000 cavalry, and 60 war elephants from surrounding areas, because again, Carthage is in the northern tip of Africa. So he's got war elephants. And what he's going to do is he's going to do something totally crazy that no one ever thought would happen. Okay, he's going to march his forces through Spain and over the Alps into Italy. Now, again, the Swiss Alps, one of the largest mountain ranges in the world. He's going to take his men and he's going to take elephants over the cliffs. All right. So let's kind of look at at his route. All right. So Carthage here, he's going to take him all the way through the Alps. Apparently, at some points in their crossing of the Alps, the cliff edges were so narrow and so small that the troops were literally hand and knees crawling in a single file line because there was not enough room for everybody else. So obviously, if you're going to do this, you're going to go through the Alps in kind of the winter time. You're going to lose a lot of men. Okay, and that's what happens. Okay, he loses a majority of his fighting force, a majority of his elephants crossing the Alps. Okay, but when he gets to the other side, again, Hannibal being Hannibal, he doesn't let the disadvantage in numbers of troops or equipment or whatever kind of stop him at all. So he has a lot of early successes in the first few years. The Battle of Cannae there is probably, he pulls off what is considered to be like a military impossibility. It's where you have a smaller force, but yet you still somehow encircle a larger force. Okay, so it's almost impossible to do, and Hannibal does it. We'll see one other example of somebody doing it later on in history, but right now it's like this unthought of circumstances where you can have less troops, but yet still encircle a larger group and slaughter them. And that's basically what happens at Cannae there. And you'll see that in the video coming up later too next week, where they talk about how basically the Roman troops are so squished together that they're not even able to swing their swords. There's not enough room to kind of cock it back and throw, so they're kind of just stuck together in this slaughter pit. And that's basically what happens. I believe they lose like 70,000 men in one battle. And it was just the luck of the daylight, because they didn't fight at night normally. So once kind of the day ended, the fight was over, and that's kind of what happened. They basically got slaughtered from sun up till sundown. All right, so not good. Now, to stop Hannibal, because again, he's been kind of just running amok in the countryside. Hannibal knows that he has to have Rome fight on his terms. And to do that, he can't just go on a full-fledged invasion of Rome itself. He needs to keep drawing them out into the countryside. So what he does is he'll like start fires on these little villages or harass little villages, and there's the political factor that Hannibal's playing on, because the generals don't really want to leave Rome and go fight Hannibal on his own terms. They know that they need to kind of have the city of Rome and the fortifications to help stop him. But as he's out there kind of performing these little I guess, smash and grabs on these little villages, the political pressure on the consuls is that, hey, go out there and get this guy. We're supposed to be Rome, and we got this one guy out here for like literally 13 years, just burning our crops and destroying our villages. So you need to get out there. All right. So the political pressure is one of the major reasons why Hannibal was able to be successful, especially early on, right? When they would just send people out there and they would just get slaughtered by Hannibal's genius. All right, so input a new guy, okay, Fabius. Fabius gets kind of the nickname, but it's not a good nickname. They gave him the nickname the Delayer as kind of mocking him. All right, So Fabius the Delayer was the Roman general who was sent to slow down Hannibal. He, however, would not attack directly and only attack him from a distance. So Fabius would kind of do the Hannibal on Hannibal. He would just hit and run. And what Fabius knew was that, if we look back to here, Hannibal, the supply chain is impossible for Carthage to perform over a majority of years. Okay? Eventually, they're going to run out of supplies. They can't pillage the countryside forever, is what Fabian thought. So eventually, they would have to surrender. They'd run out of food or run out of whatever. So Fabian was kind of playing the long game. Okay? But the people in Rome were not happy with it. They wanted someone to go and take the fight to Hannibal. So again, we talked about the consuls every other day, right? How somebody else takes over one day, and then the other guy takes over the next day. So that's kind of what happened here. And eventually, Fabius is replaced by a guy named Scipio Africanus, because Scipio was willing to bring the fight to Carthage, and that's what he did. To lure Hannibal away from Rome, Scipio decides to just go attack Carthage. All right, Carthage, all their army is in Italy. So when he starts to make his way back to Carthage to attack it, Hannibal catches wind, and he has to quickly retreat back to Carthage to stop him. And obviously it doesn't go good, because at the Battle of Zama in 202, this takes place right outside of Carthage, Hannibal loses. All right, so Hannibal finally loses. And so the result is Carthage again has to pay the war reparations, but this time they're going to be 3 times bigger. So Carthage is in a world of hurt financially, plus they were supposed to abandon all the territories other than the city of Carthage. So Carthage, which was once a great empire, has now been shrunk back to just one city. All right, and so we're going to skip ahead here. The Third Punic War, we got this guy named Cato the Censor. He ends up going to Carthage. I believe he was checking in on something. I forget exactly what. But while he's in Carthage, he notices that they have rebuilt. They've reloaded. They're way more prosperous than what they should have been at the time. Their army was way stronger than what it should have been at the time. So he gets worried. He's also a war hawk. A war hawk is somebody who wants to go to war. So he basically goes back, and inside the Senate, he just is always talking about how we must destroy Carthage, and he's always bringing up in his speeches how Carthage, we need to stop them now before they get too strong, and then we'll never defeat them. All right, so he finally convinces the Senate we should force the citizens of Carthage to relocate and use the city of Carthage as a Roman base. They were supposed to be relocated about 100 miles from the Mediterranean coast. Obviously, Carthage is going to refuse, which sparks the Third Punic War. But unlike the second one, it's kind of a rout. Okay, the Romans dominate. They burn the city of Carthage to the ground. They pour salt on the land, right? How salt's bad for your crops. So not only do they want to destroy Carthage, they want to make sure Carthage stays destroyed, and that's what they do. All right, anybody who survived, 50 or 60,000 people, depending on which source you look at, they're all sold into slavery. They burn the city down. A lot of people burn with the city as well. So that's basically the end of the Punic Wars. All right. Rome's victorious. Rome becomes the big superpower, and it kind of springboards Rome into a new age, and we'll talk about that. So here's the 4 big things that come out of the war. Some of them are social, right? Like free marriage and divorce. Women maintain control over their own property. That kind of comes with the soldiers dying and what to do with the land. So there's some good things that come out of it. We get an economic revolution and a social revolution, which we'll talk about here. All right. So a lot of big things come out of it, but obviously the biggest one is that Rome is now the sole superpower of the Mediterranean. They have a monopoly on all the trade. All right, so after that, we start to get this there's going to be like a little civil war for power. To put this lightly, you'll have guys like Gaius Marius here. Each individual general now is going to pay their own soldiers. Okay, so you'll have Marius here, you'll have a guy named Sulla, Crassus, even Julius Caesar. Okay, all these people are just going to basically pay out of pocket for their own soldiers. So as a soldier now, I'm no longer loyal to Rome. I'm loyal to the guy that's paying me. So we get all these little military leaders who are going to fight to become the dictator and eventually the emperor of Rome. So let's talk about some of these reformers, because a lot of these guys are going to try to rule Rome. So the first two are the two brothers, the Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius. Their big reform was that the poor should be given grain and small plots of free land. Obviously, if we're giving anything from the rich to the poor, the rich hate it. So much so that Tiberius ends up being killed by the Senate while giving a speech on his reforms. His brother runs away, but eventually commits suicide as the mob was basically had him encircled. So that's a perfect example of change in Rome. It normally doesn't go good. The next guy is one of the main people trying to fight to become the ruler of the new Rome. His name is Gaius Marius. Now, his big thing was he's going to recruit an army from the poor and homeless. Normally, right now in Rome, only the wealthy can become soldiers, so there's kind of like this prestige that comes with being in the Roman legions. But now he's going to recruit an army of the homeless and the poor, which makes up about 25-30% of Rome. All right, so basically Rome just now has 25 to 30% more soldiers, more powerful. All right, and he's going to pay them even if they are not fighting. Okay, so he'll pay him to train. Sulla, he's another guy that's fighting for it. We're going to kind of save Sulla for a different day with Julius Caesar. He kind of, as you can kind of see here, Sulla and Julius Caesar have a little bit of a rivalry, and it's more like family ties. Who's married to who? Divorces, family squabbles. But in Rome, family squabbles lead to death. So you guys can read through that, but we'll talk about that more later when we talk about the what I'm trying to say, the first triumvirate and stuff like that. Last thing of the day, I just want to talk about Spartacus real quick. So I think we all kind of know who he is. Spartacus was once a gladiator. This one was just a cool story that comes out of Rome during this time. He's a gladiator. He starts with 70 men. He escapes from like this training dorm where they train gladiators. He escapes with all these other gladiators, and they kind of run the countryside. And they kind of become like folk heroes to the poor. All right. So we get two guys sent out, Pompey and Crassus. We're set to crush the rebellion. Pompey and Crassus are going to become important later on. This is kind of just them getting their feet wet a little bit here. All right. Pompey was a great war hero, conquered Syria, Palestine, and some northern parts of Spain. Crassus is the wealthiest man in Rome. He's said to have 60% of Rome to himself, and his go-to is he privatizes fire departments. So what he does is he will literally light your house on fire and then say, hey, it'll cost you this much money for me to put it out with my fire department. So obviously, people pay it, otherwise their house burns. And he becomes extremely rich doing that. All right. Spartacus, eventually, his story comes to an end. He ends up getting killed at the Silver River, and kind of this Robin Hood story tale comes to an end. But it just leads into another rivalry. Pompey actually captures 5,000 slaves, and he runs back to Rome, trying to say that he won. But Crassus also has 6,000 slaves. And to prove his victory, what he does is with these 6,000 slaves, he crucifies every single one on the Appa Way, the Roman road system. So like think about telephone poles on a road, but instead of telephone lines, it's people being crucified. So it's quite an image. And so people start to kind of say, okay, yep, Pompey definitely helped win. Crassus definitely helped win. All right, helped defeat Spartacus in this rebellion. So they both kind of become somewhat famous because of their defeating of Spartacus, who's kind of like public enemy number one to the rich, but like a hero to the poor. All right, so here's what I'm talking about with the Appa Way. So just imagine on the sides here, like telephone poles, just people being crucified. And the crucified is like, people on the cross, right, with their hands, nailed and whatnot, all that. So it's pretty horrific stuff, all right? But for us, that's the end of our notes, all right? I don't want to have a part 3, so we got 30 seconds left. Here's our learning targets for today. Big things, Punic Wars, who fought in them, who won, and who were the key people, right? Hamilcar Barca, Hannibal Barca, Scipio Africanus, Fabius the Delayer, a bunch of guys, okay? And you'll see some of them on the review guide. Obviously, go back to the key vocab to figure things out, right? Like the Battle of Zama's on there and all that. But I got 9 seconds now. That's what I got for notes. I will see you guys tomorrow.